Well, hello again. Welcome to Horror in Detail. Today we are going to share Wendigo encounter stories. First story. By you/Spazzies_ here. I survived a Wendigo. This is not the first story. The first one will be posted after this. My apologies. I've been hidden for a while now. You know that feeling of your home being the safest place on earth, as if it was an impenetrable fortress? It's a foreign feeling. Well, as it turns out, it only resides when you feel as if there is a trust between you and nature. And when you have broken that wall with an entity, you've lost the feeling. The happiest feeling of them all, safety. My home was a sanctuary at one point. You could confide in it for days, if you wished. The feeling of comfort would draw people in like a compass towards the north. But it's gone now. It's foreign, as I said. You take it for granted, and when it's gone it's utterly crippling. You have to hide, you have to run, just to try to find solace in a place that has none. It's in my house. The feeling is gone and it's in my house. I've been hiding in my cleaning closet for around 2 hours, pretty sure, and I don't know how long else this will last as the Wendigo is out for my blood, in my own house. I'll elaborate, but I don't have much time. Last week it started with the taunting. The hello s and the jack s still bumbling around in my mind as I type. The beast taunted me. Its bravado-packed lungs wanted to tease me and get me to move from sanctuary to catch a kill, and that doesn't make me scared, it just pisses me off. It started with the taunting while I was camping, and when I got fed up, I yelled back at it, and many reverb voices came and yelled right back at me, including my dead elderly neighbor, its early prey. Then it followed me. I screamed at it, I shot at it, and I ran home, as it was the safest place for me. And I wasted all the ammo on the damn kill. I sat there, for whatever feels like forever ago now, in front of my door, blocking it. But the creature is smart, found a way onto my leveraged patio, and glazed in my window. Then came the tapping. The slow consistent tink-tink-tink on the glass. It was soft, and the monster crouched down to not peer in the window, but the tapping, it was worse. It grew, slowly rising from the soft tink-tink-tink to thuds against the glass, slowly cracking the canvas from the middle out, until I heard it. Hello. The glass crumbled. It crawled, and within the next second, the shards distinctly crunching under the weight of the thing. By this point I had my back turned, behind the door, so I had no visuals. The only thing guiding me to that thing was the soft smushing of the carpet under its feet, leading directly to the closet I was in. I leaned against the thin door as if it were a shield against a cascade of arrows, clinging my last hope tightly. It made it to the door. I heard it take a deep long breath in. Then out. It leaned in close, and sniffed. Repeat a couple more times, and he was on his way. He went over to my room door, which was across the hall. I heard the inhale, a stuttering one this time, since he was sniffing. He took a pause. It felt like he debated for a moment. I opened the closet door a tiny crack to instigate what he had stopped for. He had his head tilted. Then took a step back, and rammed the door with his antlers. I jumped at the noise alone, as he hit the door fairly hard. I looked back to see him rearing himself up to go at it again, and I focused on his antlers. They still looked splintered, as if he took on a tornado and landed headfirst onto his antlers from 100 feet up in the air. It looked as if when he took another ramming to the door, the antlers would crumble on impact, and so when he bowed his head, and took a lunge forward, and broke through the door, I was surprised. The door had a hole in it now, he had wriggled out of it a second earlier. The door had a hole, and to accompany it, the door bent inwards towards the hall, near the left upper corner, so much that the pole bit holding the hinge parts together, and broke it to the extent that there was an inch of room between the two halves. He wrung 3 of his fingers into the gap of the door hinge, and another 4 into the hole. He bent forward, and pulled swift and fast, tearing the door from its hinges and breaking the overlapping frame with it. Preceding this, the beast stuck his head in, towards an angle so his antlers didn't get caught in the hole where the door used to be. I was scared he found a scent trail of my stuff, since he could then find me based off my scent. He went inside the room, and around 30 seconds of him sniffing around, he started rummaging. I thought I heard a low, raspy, "See-you here? Yo, you are here." As if he was talking to himself, muttering. I slowly shut the crack of the door I was behind, and as soon as I had fully done so, I heard it. There were 2 thuds, then a smash and crumble of the glass. I looked out of the reimbursed crack I made. He escaped. He smashed my window and escaped. Not only was I scared, now I was scared and pissed off, because now I have this damn thing taunting me like I'm its prey. In which I will not be. I'm going to leave this segment off here. I need to pack. I need to prepare for the inevitable, and I'm going to kill that damned beast. Second story. This story was shared by you/Chad457. Possession. Things have been happening recently and I can't explain them. I have become scared for my life because of these events. I didn't know where else to turn, so I thought I'd share my story before it's too late. Everything started back when I was younger. It was a normal Saturday for 8-year-old me, early morning cartoons with cereal and the like. This was my first experience with the demonic presence that now haunts my everyday life. I had just come in from playing outside with the other neighborhood kids when the window next to me shattered. It startled me, so I jumped and turned to see if it was one of the other kids who threw a rock or a ball too hard, but there was nothing, just broken glass on the ground. I ran upstairs to tell my mom that the window broke and I had no idea how it happened. She went down to check and I went to my room to play with my toys, but before I could start I heard her yell for me to come downstairs. Trying to figure out how to explain how the broken window, I went down the stairs and saw that the window was perfectly okay and looked untouched. What do you mean the window shattered? All the windows are fine and I didn't hear anything, she asked me while looking confused. I started to say how I knew it was that one and that I saw it laying there broken, but she cut me off, telling me to stop playing jokes and to go upstairs. Upset that I was brushed off like that, I went upstairs and thought on the idea. I guess I had convinced myself that it didn't really break and I was just seeing things because of how hot it was. From that point on, a few years I didn't notice anything strange, but it may have happened and I missed it. I was 15 years old and I finally had a room to myself because my older brother moved out and bought his own place. We had shared a room my whole life, so the room felt different with him gone. I had just assumed it was because my brother was gone and the room was now a little bigger. I was horribly mistaken. My first few weeks in the room seemed pretty normal other than the occasional sound of a whisper I passed off as wind, and I never slept well. I would wake up with terrible nightmares of a tall shadowy figure becoming more and more aggressive with every passing night. The first night, if I remember right, happened in my parents' room. I walked in and saw the man sitting on the bed. I asked him what he was doing, but he just stared at me. I tried to get his attention and finally he grabbed my wrist. It burned, so I woke up. I looked at my wrist and I saw faint bruising and my wrists felt hot, like they were burned. The last dream I had of him was in my own room. They always started with him staring at me and nothing I could do would get me away from him. He stood up and tackled me to the ground and he got very close to me and said, "I'm always watching you." And then he scratched me across my chest, waking me up in a cold sweat and blood coming from my new wounds. I was scared to tell my mom about this because of what he said to me. I didn't know what he would do. The next night I tried to stay awake to avoid him as long as possible. As I lay there in my bed fighting off the sleep, my closet door opened. My heart started to beat faster because I did not know what was going to happen. As the door opened, it was him just standing there. I panicked. I tried to get out of my bed, but I couldn't move. No matter how hard I struggled, I couldn't move. I thought he was going to kill me right there, but he didn't. He just stood there, looming over me with his empty figure. There was nothing I could do but stare at him in total fear. From the darkness of my closet he stood as a darker figure just watching me. I couldn't move, I couldn't talk, and I couldn't sleep if I had tried. Although there was no way I would try and sleep with him standing there. After that night of pure terror and dread, it finally became morning and he left. I jumped up as fast as I could and went to tell my mother about what had happened. Again I was completely blown off with her saying, "Oh, come on, you are 15, you shouldn't be scared of your closet. And it was probably just a bad dream, you were safe all night, no one entered the house and we would have heard them leave." I was so tired from my night of no sleep I slept through school. When I told my friends, they all told me it was bullshit and that I was making stuff up. Sadly, I wish I was. This happened every day for about 2 months or so. No matter where I tried to sleep in my house, he came for me. He always found a way to me. My only time to sleep was in school, and that led to my grades dropping drastically. My only freedom from him other than school was when I went to a friend's house. He stopped after about 2 months of the torment and I didn't see him again. Fast forward this to 6 days ago. Things have started happening again. This was just as I started to convince myself it never happened, and I was just having terrible nightmares where I would end up hurting myself, because people do that, right? It was Sunday night when my dad told me that he and my mom were going out and I would be home alone for a while. I was fine with this because I always had Reddit to look at. I got hungry after they left, so I walked down the stairs, and in the hall I thought I saw a shadow move down the hall and turn the corner. I slowly followed, fearing that he has returned. As I entered the kitchen I saw him. He was standing in the middle of my kitchen and I could feel my heart pound, my face flush, and the terrible feel of terror coming over me. I stared at him and he lunged at me. I blacked out. I woke up in my bed and I felt sick, so I couldn't help but throw up. I noticed I wasn't wearing the same shirt as I had last night. And was that all just another dream? I looked around for my phone and after a lot of searching I found it. I open it and see the date, 7:56 p.m., January 19th, 2012. Where the hell was I for the last week? I looked myself over for any injuries in hopes of finding out what had happened, and I saw my scars on my chest looked cut again. I continued to look around my room and eventually opened the closet and find everything is ripped down and the walls have blood on them. Written on the wall it says, "Boss, may sunt." I had no idea what it meant, but now I could guess where that cut came from. I searched online for a translator to try to find it. It appeared to have been Latin and it said, "You are mine." I panicked. I grabbed my phone and went out the door to my car. I called my girlfriend in hopes she knew what had happened to me over the week. She answered and told me that I had not been in school all week and no one knew where I was. Apparently my parents reported me missing Monday morning when I didn't come back the night before and no one knew where I was. She asked if everything was okay and I hung up. I don't know why I did it, because I wanted to talk to her, but I felt like I was forced to move. I got in my car and drove. I drove fast. And as suddenly as I stopped having control a few minutes ago, it was gone and I was in control again. I knew it was the same demonic spirit that has haunted me my entire life finally trying to take control. I tried to get home so I could think of what to do next. I looked in my rear view mirror and he was there behind me in the back seat of my car. He grabbed my neck and started to squeeze. I had to use both hands to try to fight back, but it was no use. I couldn't touch him and I was fading fast. Since I didn't have control of the wheel, the car went off-road and slammed into a tree. Thankfully someone saw this and called an ambulance. I woke up today in the hospital with my parents and police around me. They asked me where I had been all week and how I crashed, but I had no idea what had happened during the week. I didn't know what to tell them. I did, however, tell them about all my other experiences with this demonic presence and how it was trying to kill me. This time they believed me and they started to panic, but I started to feel his presence. My parents left me to go and try to find someone who could help me, a paranormal team or something. This is now the point where I reach the present and am currently typing this from my hospital bed on my phone. I don't know what will happen to me tonight and I am afraid for my life. Third story. This story was shared by you/Queen Meowko. The Wendigo. I am a fan of horror games. I don't play them, but I love watching my favorite YouTubers play them. In fact, my favorite YouTuber who used to play horror games is H2O Delirious. One of my favorite game that he played is Until Dawn. I love it because it deals with a cultural monster, the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a monster who craves for human flesh. Wendigos were once human, but because they started to eat human flesh, they turned into Wendigos. Wendigos are able to imitate other people's voices to trick their prey. Wendigos are able to hear heartbeats from miles away. They are also really fast. I am starting to go off topic. Here is my story. I had my own experience with the Wendigo. I live in a small town near the forest. I won't reveal where the place is because I am still afraid that it is still there. A friend and I, a female girl that is a year younger than me, decided to walk in the forest by ourselves. There aren't any dangers in the forest since we were still close to town. We stumbled upon a 2-story, worn-down cabin while walking near the outskirts of town. Most of the second story was non-existent. It seemed strange that it was still up and no one torn it down. Before I was born, the people of this town torn down all buildings in the forest for reasons unknown. I tried asking my parents, but their response is that it was very difficult to aid people who lived in the forest. Anyway, my friend and I got very curious and decided to check it out. We were quiet upon entering the cabin, which now that I am looking back at it, I am very thankful that we were quiet. At the time we were quiet in case there was a homeless man sleeping or a dangerous person in there. It was still daytime when we were exploring, so we had plenty of light in the cabin, but there was one part of the cabin that was covered up. There was a black tarp that covered a doorway to some room. We never went near the doorway. We were both scared that we would get jumped by someone. My friend and I both agreed to stay clear of that area. Throughout the exploring we both noticed that there was a faint, disgusting smell. The smell lingered only on the first floor. Though the reason is because since the second floor is open, the wind would blown off the smell away. Plus there must have been dead animals beneath the floorboards or something. It was only when we got near the closed-off room did everything went downhill. Both my friend and I started to get a bit louder since we did not hear anybody in the building. When we got near the hallway of the room, the smell got drastically stronger. Then we both noticed that the tarp had moved ajar. The room was still too dark, but I could have sworn that there were a pile of bones. I noticed that my friend gotten slightly scared because neither one of us had gone 8 feet near the room. My first thought was that someone was living here and that we should get out quietly in case the person was dangerous. I signaled my friend to be quiet and to follow me towards the back exit. As we were about to leave, we heard a familiar voice. I looked at my friend and I could see in her face confusion. Then it spoke again. It was calling for help. We both continued to stand near our exit, frozen in shock. Who could it be? Why would anybody need help in this place? We explored this cabin and we know the area. You could hardly get hurt around here. I got rid of my shock and slowly I went near the shouts. My friend, upon realizing that I was making my way towards the shouts, pulled me back. She told me that it might be a trap and that I should not go any nearer to the person. She also said that the voice seems off. She does not understand why, but she knows that there is something off about the screams. No later, when she said that, we heard some other people shout if the mysterious screaming person was okay. Quick movements were heard somewhere in the cabin. Fear struck us both and we slowly walked backwards to the door. The movements that we heard seemed inhuman. The sound we heard is like the sound of the wind of a jump rope makes when going really fast. Not only that, but after the event, when my friend got the courage to speak about this event, she said that she saw a blur move across the room near where, maybe, the other people were at. By the time we were at the door, the other people came. They were two unfortunate men. They both looked around before seeing us. "Are you two okay?" one of them asked. We gave no response. We were still afraid what was in the house. One step forward towards us was enough. "Are you dash?" He got cut off. The thing that was lurking in the shadows came out. It attacked the man. The thing was bony and the skin was pale and rotten. It looked human, but it clearly wasn't. The thing ripped the head of the poor man. We did not see the rest of it, for we booked out of the cabin and ran as fast as we could. All we heard a scream, but as soon as we heard it, it was cut off. Then there was another one. But this one was inhuman. We both did not stop until we reached the town. We never spoke to this event to anybody. Not even when people have asked us if we were okay, since we both looked pale and out of breath. Be careful out there in the woods. You never know what might happen. May the Lord save you if you come across one of them. Fourth story. This story was shared by you/Native River Bear. Symptoms of demonic possessions. Warning signs of demonic possession. Before we get into the warning signs, I want to make an important point. What follows is a guide. It can help you to make a determination whether there is a psychiatric problem or a demonic one. However, it is not the end-all. One should not read an article on brain tumors and diagnose themselves as having one. Neither should they look at this article and decide they are possessed by an evil entity. If you are the type of person who is very suggestible, I suggest you do not read any further. The purpose of this article is to inform people regarding what is out there. It is not meant to scare the hell out of anyone. If you feel that you are or may be possessed, please contact a professional. You can contact this website or any other site that deals with the subject of demonic possession. Do not diagnose yourself. Demonic possession is a very rare phenomenon. Although it happens more often than people realize, it is still considered rare. Science has swept away much of what used to be considered demonic possession. Diseases of the mind such as schizophrenia, Tourette syndrome and various forms of psychosis were once regarded as surefire signs that diabolical infestation was taking place. We have come a long way over the years, and many of the people suffering from the above diseases can live active lives while on medication. Many use this as proof that possession does not exist. After all, some reason, science has proven that it does not exist. The church fuels this line of thinking today. In this modern era, the church seeks to write off the devil as a concept, as opposed to being an intelligent force. However, it is flawed thinking. For openers, science does not have close to all the answers, and science is always changing. What we once believed as scientific fact now comes under scrutiny itself. In addition to that, there are some very unusual manifestations that take place in demonic possession. These things cannot be explained by science and they offer no cure for them either. It is true that in past centuries, mentally ill people were subjected to difficult exorcisms and the results were poor. It can be rightly argued that those people were done a great disservice and their mental diseases became much worse as a result. Whatever else was wrong with them, they were branded as evil as a result of the exorcisms. As often happens when science and religion get together, the pendulum swings the other way. Unfortunately, it has swung way too far, to the point where people who are being demonized are given antipsychotic medication and turned into walking zombies. As the old exorcisms failed to help those with mental illnesses and even made them worse, we now have the reverse. People who are demonized are being made worse because they are being treated for a condition that does not exist. You would believe that somewhere there is a happy medium, but to date, it has not happened. What we will do here is produce a list of conditions that must be met to properly diagnose the problem. Where there are emotional symptoms or symptoms that are likely to be a result of mental illness, I will say so. However, it must be pointed out that many who are possessed are also mentally ill. It may be a direct result of the possession, it may be why the possession took place. The line between the two is not so vague. There is some gray area, but there are so many things that occur with possession, things that are taking place around the person, that it is hard to classify what is taking place as strictly psychiatric. Those things are called outward manifestations. These are things like moving objects in the house, voices that are not coming from the person. There may even be physical assaults by unseen entities. What I will do is break this down into 3 categories. The first has to do with mental changes in the victim, the second have to do with physical changes by the person, and the third has to do with preternatural changes in the environment. Mental changes affecting the person. 1. Look for changes in personality. This is usually seen when the person is affable and suddenly becomes extremely quiet. 2. Someone who is normally very active suddenly becomes isolative. 3. Look for changes in sleep patterns. 4. Look for sudden weight loss or gain. 5. Look for changes in attitude and behavior, usually becoming hostile. 6. Someone who begins cursing a lot when that is out of character for them. 7. Notice if they suddenly have an aversion to religious objects. They may be a person who normally goes to church but suddenly despises the thought. 8. Look for evidence of self-mutilation. 9. Look for changes in the way the person dresses. 10. Observe their personal hygiene and look for changes. 11. Look for evidence of occult materials in the room. 12. Look for destructiveness on the part of a person, especially if that destruction is of religious objects. 13. They may become abusive and threatening for no reason. 14. They may become violent. They often attempt to hurt animals. 15. The person may experience severe nightmares or night terrors. 16. They may perform acts of humiliation, such as urinating on themselves, etc. 17. They may be sexually preoccupied. Excessive masturbation or doing it in front of others. 18. Take note of what appears to be a different personality or multiple personalities. 19. Look for unusual changes in diet. Foods that were once favorites may now be repulsive to the person. They may eat foods that they once detested. 20. Take note if they seem to have blackouts in their memory. The above items can well be psychiatric or psychological changes, therefore, you must be wary when you look at these as signs of possession. All of the above can be cries for help or signal the beginning of drug use or mental illness. When these are the only things present, seek psychological counseling first, before even giving thought to the possibility of demonic possession. Many of these changes are normal, especially when dealing with teenagers. Do not automatically think of possession unless you have some reason to believe they are vulnerable to possession. For example, if they have been performing rituals or dabbling in the occult and then you start noticing personality changes. However, the likelihood is that it is a natural problem, natural being psychiatric or psychological. As you will see, there are many other indications of possession. Look for some of those before you give credence to the idea of possession. In addition, never mention to someone undergoing personality changes that they might be possessed. You can plant a dangerous seed by doing that. Physical changes affecting the person. 1. The person involved may go for long periods of time without blinking their eyes. Can indicate a neurological condition. 2. The person may appear catatonic. Can also be a sign of mental illness. 3. The person speaks a language they could not possibly know. Or speak English with unusual accents. 4. The person speaks in tongues. 5. The person will become completely rigid where they cannot be moved at all, even by multiple people. 6. Look for changes in the eyes. They may turn almost black like shark eyes. 7. Look for obvious changes in their features. 8. The person may possess inhuman strength. 9. The person may exhibit precognition, the ability to predict the future. 10. The person displays retrocognition, the ability to know about past events they should not know about. 11. The person may be able to know something about a person they have not met. 12. Their voice may change. It may go from high to low to guttural. 13. They may be able to tell what you are thinking. 14. They may move in some unusual way. For example, they may seem to glide instead of walk. 15. Writing or symbols may appear on the body in the form of welts and scratches. Look especially in areas they could not reach. 16. They may levitate. 17. Hair or eye color may change. 18. There may be multiple voices coming from the person at the same time. 19. Take note if animals appear to be frightened of the person, especially if they begin acting fearful when there are personality changes in the person. A couple of these symptoms can be related to medical or psychological conditions, but most of them fall outside the realm of science. If you start to see a few items in this category, there is serious cause for concern. At this point, you start to take items from the first category and see if they are consistent with items from things in this second category, or the third one I am about to detail. Obviously, some are more telling than others. You have to give weight to the values and you try to make a determination. The Holy Spirit should be called on for guidance and discernment, especially where there are only vague manifestations. Outward manifestations. 1. Objects move around seemingly by themselves. 2. Objects may disappear and not be found again. Asporting. 3. Objects may disappear and be found in another location. Teleporting. 4. Objects may disappear and later be found where they originally were. 5. Objects may come from nowhere. Apports. 6. Knocking, banging or pounding may be heard throughout the house or in just one room. 7. Objects fly around as if they were thrown from unseen hands. 8. There may be knocks at the door but no one is ever there. These are often heard in threes, as this is a way of mocking the Holy Trinity. Ditto for doorbells. 9. Religious articles disappear or are destroyed. They may also be desecrated. 10. Growling may be heard but the source cannot be located. 11. There may be scratching sounds heard without an obvious source. 12. There may be foul odors that have no verifiable source. They may come and go. 13. Odd lights may be seen. They may shoot around a room. 14. Heavy furniture may move on its own. 15. There may be sightings of people or dark shadows that may or may not have form. 16. Odd-looking creatures may be seen. 17 doors and drawers may open and close on their own. 18 electrical appliances may turn on or off. 19 spontaneous fires may start up. 20 animals may become spooked and stay away from the targeted person altogether. 21 animals may growl at something they see but you do not. 22 Any talk of God or religion may cause an outbreak of activity. 23 Glass may break for no reason. 24 Sounds of glass breaking may be heard but there is no evidence of it happening. 25 There may be sudden temperature changes, up and down although it is usually down. These can be recorded on a thermometer. 25 A person may suddenly become cold while the temperature remains constant. A thermometer may record a 1 to 2 degree drop in that person. 26 People may have a feeling of being watched or that they are not alone. 27 People may hear voices when no one is present. 28 People will often hear their name called only to find that no one is around. Sometimes, a couple will each think they heard the other call to them. 29 There may be a sensation of wind blowing even with the windows closed. 30 Lights will go off or not come on when turned on. 31 Apparent retaliation after some attempt to stop the activity. 32 Activity starts up when you attempt to say prayers. 33 Apparent retaliation if a clergyman has been to the home. 34 Physical attacks. It might be in the form of punching, scratching, biting, hair pulling, etc. 35 Psychological attacks. The devil knows your weaknesses and will try to exploit them. Someone who feels ashamed about something will have an increase in that emotion. The same is true for depression, anxiety, and anything else you can think of. 36 Sexual assaults. This can run the gamut from fondling to actual penetration. This can occur in males as well as females. 37 Levitation of objects or people. A fair number of the items listed in the above category could be the result of a human spirit. This is why you have to look at all three columns together to get a fair sampling. If any of the above takes place and stop when commanded to in the name of God, or if holy water stops the activity, that is a good sign of a serious problem. However, judging one or two items by itself is not a large enough sample to conclusively prove the influence of something diabolical. The Roman ritual does not require a specific number when it comes to proving that something demonic is taking place. Rather, what you have to do is paint a picture, of sorts. Consider all of the evidence together before making a determination. It is also very important to rule out what you can as being natural in origin. Take into account that when people are frightened, their senses sharpen and every sound appears ominous, even natural, everyday sounds. Imaginations will run wild when one believes that something evil is taking place. That must be considered when someone comes up to you and tells you that they believe a house is haunted or a person is demonically possessed. While you cannot be close-minded, you must remain skeptical. Rushing into an exorcism where one is not necessary can have serious consequences. If a person is suffering from a mental illness, an exorcism will only exacerbate the situation. The person may now believe they are evil. If the exorcism is being done on a house where it is not needed, it can attract attention and stir up trouble where there was none before. In this field, better safe than sorry does not apply. An exorcism is a very serious thing and it is extremely dangerous. It can have serious consequences. Where evil is involved, the person who is called on to combat it is in serious danger, and if they are not careful, the consequences can be horrendous. It is not something to be played with. Only someone who has had experience in both the supernatural and church teaching should even attempt to perform this rite. It is best if that person has been ordained as an exorcist. During an exorcism, anything or nothing can happen. There is no set standard. In some cases, all hell seems to break loose, In others, not a peep is heard. Sometimes the smell of roses permeates the location, a positive sign that the entity has been expelled. However, it can take some time before you are sure an exorcism has worked. Sometimes the ritual forces them into a state of dormancy. However, at a later date, the problem may arise again. In many cases, multiple exorcisms may have to take place. The devil can be a persistent force and it will hold on for as long as it can. It sometimes comes down to attrition. The person who performs the exorcism must know the risks. There is likely to be retaliation, so that person must stay in God's light at all times. There is no sense of time on the other side, so even though an exorcism was performed 10 years ago, there is still the risk of retaliation. There is always the risk of retaliation. Fifth story. This story was shared. The howls of a blind Wendigo. Imagery for the story: truck driver with a mid-sized company, my assigned truck being a long-nosed Peterbilt with one of those driver-controlled searchlights mounted just above the mirror. I've been driving for 5 years, have gone 650,000 miles and somehow managed not to lose my mind in the process. Come one autumn day about a year back and I was given the delivery that would bring me an experience I hadn't thought would exist except in my worst nightmares. I had received a message on my truck's computer to make a multi-stop run from Indianapolis to Duluth, then from Duluth to a town called Ely. The run to Duluth had been no problem with a 2-day trip. The run from Duluth to Ely seemed a bit trickier, what with the quickest, legal, run being Minnesota Route 1 from Minnesota 61. It was that certain kind of night where everything was shrouded in darkness. The moon was covered by the clouds and a winter storm was on the horizon, making the air even colder than it already was. I figured that I deserved a nice warm cup of coffee after this drive was over. The drive along 61 was uneventful with only a couple of cars and semi-tractors on the road this late into the night. The radio was calling for a light forecast of hazy rain with a relatively thick fog until that afternoon, all the more reason to get this run finished, I supposed. Sometime along Route 1, my trailer began shaking violently with my truck having difficulty in pulling along a flat line of grass. I noticed one of my tires on my trailer had ruptured. Annoyed with losing time, I pulled into a small grove and parked along a worn dirt path facing the highway. To rear of my tractor was a thick bundle of northern forest that likely hadn't seen human tracks in decades. A quiet wind washed over me as I relayed a breakdown message to my company, receiving another that a tow wouldn't be out until the morning. No problem, I've got a fridge full of food and a satellite for TV. Several hours passed as I laid in my bed. A windstorm woke me up as I tossed and turned to gain my bearings. That wasn't wind I was hearing. The best I can describe it is the sound of metal sliding against metal, like the brakes of a locomotive. The noise was some distance away, roughly a quarter mile to the rear if I had to guess. The noise was getting closer, more to the left of my truck, somewhat about the front of the trailer. I could hear what sounded like tapping fingers or claws against my trailer. The sound of hoofsteps marching through the thick grass alerted me to the fact that this may be just a harmless animal. Wishing to take a look and ease my nerves, I slid the curtains open and came face to back with the stuff of nightmares. The antlers reached to the top of my truck's windows. The creature brandishing them was a hunched-over, bipedal mass of skin and bones with the skull of some deer or elk. Fearfully, I turned the searchlights on to get a better look at the thing in question and to hopefully frighten it off. I wish I hadn't. The light itself hadn't alerted the creature, but me moving myself in the truck had set it into a hunched-over stance, keeping an ear open for some form of prey, I presumed. I noticed empty eye sockets that seemed to go on forever that slotted into the ancient skull of some sort of deer or elk. I was afraid of turning the key in fear of rousing this monster's predatory hunger. It looked near starvation, as though it had been years since it last ate. I sat and waited. It was near 5 o'clock, the tow wouldn't come to work until around 7. A buck, roughly a 10-pointer, meandered into the field before spotting the creature in question. This thing has to have some great hearing since it didn't see the deer wander across its sight lines. It was blind, had to have been. Moments passed before the buck began chomping on berries from a nearby bush. The blind monster heard the sounds and pounced. From 15 feet it took all but 5 seconds for the buck to have been gutted and torn apart. The creature didn't seem to want the buck for food, more or less rather for twisted enjoyment. I had seen enough. Turning the engine over, the monster looked in my general direction and roared threateningly as it rushed to make contact with my truck. I managed to pull forward just enough that it made contact with the trailer instead. The trailer lifted up a few inches as the sound of bending metal embedded itself into my ears. Shifting from third to fifth and continuing to 10, the creature was still in chase until I crossed over a hill. Looking back through my mirrors, the monster was gone. I pulled off and got out. The sounds of scraping metal were far and away, replaced by the quiet rustling of trees. I continued driving again until I came upon an area that trucks could park in, well lit and asphalt, much better and safer than the grove from earlier. Afternoon came and I went to inspect the damage from last night's incident done to my trailer. Claw marks etched into the driver's side of the trailer went on for the whole length of 53 feet. A massive dent roughly 2 feet from the truck itself reminded me that I wasn't just fortunate to be alive, I was damn lucky. The delivery went off without complication since the tow only had to change a tire and I went home several days later, the creature still on my mind. I went online to figure out, bluntly, whatever the hell it was. The skull of a deer and possible bloodlust for people brought me to several conclusions, the most effective that I was either losing my mind in the mountains or that I had come face to face with an American Indian folklore nightmare known as the Wendigo, essentially what becomes of you if you cannibalize on human flesh. I've no plans on stopping on Route 1 overnight again. Talks with the locals included everything from ghosts to, of course, that same Wendigo I had encountered. I went on Route 1 again last week. The sounds of scraping metal were heard once more and I saw a shadow move across the forest at a blistering speed. I noticed that it didn't get too close this time, just close enough to see the fog from its breath. It knows who I am. It's just waiting for me to let down my guard. Sixth story. This story was shared by you/Barkianisbeast. Sleep paralysis is a doorway to possession. I have had sleep paralysis from the age of 12, and from as long as I could remember it wasn't as bad as it is now. I only used to get it once every 2 or 3 months as a child. Sometimes it would go away, sometimes it would come back. But now as I grow older and accept that I have this problem and try to deal with it, it gets worse, the affects get worse. It gets way too realistic and I have a problem realizing what is and what's not reality. Just now at 2 in the morning I awoke to my most scary one yet. It's as if I know what's going on now and I know how it happens. I awoke from a dream not remembering anything, looking up at the ceiling and breathing heavily. Then I decided to go back to sleep. About 5 minutes after doing that I straight away have a dream. I am dreaming about graduating from a Japanese high school. I know it's random but it's a dream. As I am talking to these Japanese girls, I see a figure behind the girl in the corner of the room. It looked like the girl from The Ring. I straight away know it's evil and my body begins to wake me up from the dream, but just as I was about to awake, I fall into sleep paralysis, and this one was different. I didn't see or feel any shadow man or old hag near me. I didn't feel a tightening on my chest, but I did feel a massive choke, and I couldn't breathe this time. I also tried closing my eyes, but all I saw was 2 yellow eyes staring at me in my mind. My bed started to shake, and I kept hearing screaming coming from around the bedroom. This lasted 3 minutes. I tried to move but nothing was working. This was the longest one I had. Then I started to realize my body was moving, but I wasn't in control. At this point, I know it sounds corny, but I had to do it. I called for God to help me, and as soon as I did, it left and I awoke. But I could still see her yellow eyes in my mind, and as I was about to get up, I felt a hand scrape the bottom of my ankle. I shot up in terror screaming. After this I realized something, that sleep paralysis might not be from fucked up sleeping patterns, it just could be from ghosts and demons. I know this might sound weird and crazy, I try to always tell myself that this is only if you have a terrible sleeping pattern, but this time it was different. This time the old hag and shadow man didn't come, it was as if something tried to get into my mind. That explains why I was moving and I didn't have any control. I believe I was being possessed. I have never been more scared in my life, and I know it's not over and it will be back. I feel as if sleep paralysis victims are more vulnerable than other humans are, and it's somewhat easier to being possessed by ghosts or demons. 7th story. This story was shared by you/sincerely the suicidal. I think there is a Wendigo in the Minnesota woods. First things first, I wasn't there, but I was the first person he told. This happened in southeast Minnesota. I am not going to be telling the exact location, but it was in a smallish forest on a long bike trail. One more quick thing. It was really windy this day. My friend, who we will call S, and his father were on a bike ride. It was about a 12-mile bike ride. So they are doing their thing when about 5 miles in S sees what he thinks is a deer. They keep going and S sees a flash of brown next to them in the trees, and it is like this thing is running next to them. Like keeping pace, but he doesn't hear anything. He points it out to his dad and his father says that it's probably a deer, but he agrees it is really weird, so they keep going. They get to this little beach where they usually rest and look at the river. S notices something feels off. He notices that first of all there is no trees swaying. Secondly, there is no animal noises. Then he realizes he didn't see any animals the whole time they were there. Except the deer. The silence was heavy. It was like every animal left. The woods were silent. S tells his dad that he isn't feeling very well and that he wants to go home. His dad begrudgingly agrees. They get on their bikes and S is almost hyper-aware of his surroundings. They go for a while until S sees a flash of brown again and antlers. They keep going until they hit this clearing. The clearing looks like a big field with trees around it and a bike trail through it. As they enter the clearing, S looks back and there is the fucking beast standing on its hind legs, and he said it was like 9 feet tall. It had antlers and it looked like it had a deer head or some shit. He said he was terrified. They finally got out of the woods and the wind was back and there was animal noises again. I think this was a Wendigo, but I am not sure. I honestly don't know if I believe him, but we are in Minnesota and it wouldn't be impossible, but are we a bit too far south for Wendigos? If you have any ideas or theories, please let me know. Okay, apparently I haven't hit the minimum word count, so I'll give you more minor details. We are pretty much at the bottom of Minnesota. Nowhere close to Rosisu, Minnesota. Like I said, it was really windy this day, like really windy. I think S is kinda sensitive to the paranormal. Just a little bit. Although the Wendigo isn't really paranormal. They have been biking on this trail before. They didn't go the whole way, they went about half. I think it is too short to be a Wendigo. Is it possible it is a skinwalker? I looked on a map and the tribes that were in this area were the Dakota Sioux. This area usually has a lot of wildlife. It was before noon when this happened. He didn't see any other people other than him and his dad. Neither of us know what to think about this. I'll ask him about what it smelled like or if it smelled weird in the area. Thanks a lot for watching the video till the end. Subscribe to our channel Horror in Detail. Drop your opinions/suggestions in the comments section, and like the video as it helps with the YouTube algorithm.